Something impossible happened. An ancient artifact woke after 3,000 silent years and spoke a human name. Only one person could have triggered it, a man who was never supposed to exist in that timeline. Where does a mystery begin when time itself already knows the answer? Tell me where you're watching from, subscribe to join our journey, and let's begin the story. The door shouldn't have opened at midnight. Aaron Wells looked up from his translation screen, fingers frozen over the Nayari ideograms he'd been converting into something resembling human grammar. The bioluminescent moths outside his station window cast their usual blue glow across the mist-covered valleys of Arendelle. But inside, the silence had weight. Then came the sound of the airlock cycling. He stood slowly, the kind of movement that came from 3 years of living alone and learning to expect nothing. The Nayari explorer who rented the adjacent lab space usually returned before sunset. Kelra had a schedule that could set chronometers. Midnight arrivals meant something had gone wrong. When the inner door slid open, he understood just how wrong. Kelra's normally luminescent skin looked dim, almost gray. The veins that should have pulsed with soft blue light beneath her pearlescent surface flickered like dying stars. Her expedition clothes, designed to withstand the planet's acidic mists, hung in shreds. But what made Aaron's breath catch wasn't her condition. It was what she carried. Wrapped in black fabric, cradled against her chest like something precious and poisonous at once, was an object roughly the size of a human heart, and it was beating. "Kelra," he said, keeping his voice level the way you did with injured animals in dangerous situations. "What is that?" She looked at him with those liquid mirror eyes that reflected the ceiling lights back at him. When Nayari were stressed, their eyes showed you yourself. Right now, Aaron saw his own face staring back, uncertain and afraid. "That which should never have been touched," she whispered. She moved past him to the work table, her movements careful, deliberate. When she set the object down, the black fabric fell away, and Aaron felt his academic curiosity war with something more primal. The thing was metallic, etched with patterns that hurt to look at directly, but it moved, contracted and expanded, breathed if metal could breathe. "Found it in the deep crypts," Kelra said. Her voice had a tremor he'd never heard before. In 3 years of teaching her humanity's more colorful idioms, she'd laughed exactly twice. Once when he'd explained "kick the bucket," and she'd spent 10 minutes convinced humans had very specific execution methods involving footwear and pails. The memory seemed distant now. "How deep?" Aaron asked. "Below the third seal, where the old ones built before your species learned fire." That should have been impossible. Humans had only colonized Arendelle 60 years ago. The Nayari claimed they'd built their civilization here over millennia. If she'd found human artifacts below Nayari construction, then everything both their peoples believed about this planet was wrong. Aaron reached toward the object. Kelra's hand shot out, catching his wrist. Her skin was cold. "It knows you," she said. "That's not possible." Many impossible things tonight, Aaron Wells. Were, as if responding to its name, the artifact began to hum. Not a mechanical sound, but something organic, almost musical. And then it spoke. The voice came from nowhere and everywhere, bypassing his ears and resonating directly in his skull. It spoke in ancient standard, the proto-language that predated both human and Nayari modern tongues, words that shouldn't exist, yet somehow did. "Aaron Wells," returned the echo. He stumbled back from the table. Kelra released his wrist, her eyes wide and reflecting his shock back at him perfectly. "You see?" she whispered. "It knows your name. How does it know your name?" Aaron's mouth had gone dry. In his years teaching linguistics, he'd studied ancient texts, translated dead languages, mapped the evolution of meaning across centuries. But nothing in any database or archive had prepared him for an artifact that knew who he was before he'd introduced himself. "I don't know," he said, and hated how his voice shook. "But I intend to find out." The artifact pulsed once more, and in that pulse, Aaron thought he heard something else beneath the words. Something that sounded almost like recognition, almost like welcome, almost like it had been waiting for him. Aaron didn't sleep. Neither did Kael'ra. By the time Arundel's twin suns began their slow rise over the mist oceans, they'd assembled every scanning device in the station around the artifact. Each reading contradicted the last. The spectral analyzer insisted the metal was an alloy that wouldn't be discovered for another 2 centuries. The carbon dating suggested it was 4,000 years old. The linguistic decoder had shut down twice trying to process the voice patterns. "This is wrong," Aaron muttered, adjusting the acoustic resonance scanner for the 5th time. "All of it. The readings don't make sense." Kael'ra stood on the opposite side of the table, her skin's luminescence slowly returning as the adrenaline of the previous night faded. She'd changed clothes, but hadn't eaten. Nayari could go days without food when they were processing stress. Aaron had learned that during their first translation argument, when she'd insisted the human word love was grammatically impossible because it described permanent states of temporary emotion. "What do you hear?" she asked, gesturing to his audio analysis screen. Aaron pulled up the waveform. "Human voice patterns, definitely human, but the language is pre-colonial proto-standard. We're talking about a dialect that died out 500 years ago." He zoomed in on a specific frequency band. "And it's not a recording. It's more like the metal itself is holding the sound somehow, like it's alive with language." "The old myths call it the heart of silence," Kael'ra said quietly. "My grandmother used to tell stories, an object that recorded pain, that captured memory in sound form. I thought they were just tales to frighten children." "Your grandmother knew about this?" "Knew of it, never believed it existed." She moved closer to the artifact, her reflection shimmering in its impossible surface. "The stories said it was created during the first great sorrow, when the world learned the difference between existing and living." Aaron's fingers froze on his keyboard. "That's oddly poetic for a culture that doesn't believe in emotions as permanent states." For the first time since midnight, Kael'ra smiled. It was small, tired, but real. "Even we have poetry, Aaron. We simply don't teach it to linguists who think every language should behave like theirs." He was about to respond when the artifact pulsed again. This time, instead of words, it produced a sound. His sound. His voice, but distorted, run through some cosmic echo chamber that made it simultaneously his and completely alien. The recording said, "No one will believe me, but I know I'm right. The symbols don't lie." Kael'ra's eyes went wide. "That's your voice. When did you say that?" "I never." Aaron's stomach dropped. "Wait. That was from my dissertation defense. 5 years ago, before I came to Arundel. How could this thing possibly have that?" The artifact seemed to warm under their attention, and suddenly it was mimicking his accent, the way he rounded his vowels, the slight roughness he got when arguing passionately about dead languages. It was playing him back to himself, and somehow making it sound both mocking and affectionate. Kael'ra made a sound that might have been a laugh, might have been horror. "It's copying you, like it's learning how to be you." "That's deeply unsettling," Aaron said, but he was already pulling up his old research files, the ones that had gotten him laughed out of the university. The thesis that suggested Nayari ruins showed signs of human influence in their foundational architecture. The theory everyone called academic suicide. He projected his old findings onto the wall, symbols he'd found in ancient Nayari texts that matched human ideograms, patterns that shouldn't exist. Evidence he'd been ridiculed for presenting. "I was right," he whispered. "I was right, and everyone told me I was seeing patterns that didn't exist." The artifact pulsed again, stronger this time. The room's lights flickered, and then, projected in the air above the table like a hologram from nowhere, an image appeared. A man, human, walking through a Nayari settlement that looked both ancient and impossible. The architecture was recognizable from Kalra's historical texts, but simplified earlier, primitive, and the man had Aaron's face, not similar, not coincidentally alike. The exact same face, down to the small scar above his left eyebrow from a childhood fall. "Aaron," Kalra breathed, and her skin went completely white, all color draining. "Aaron, that's impossible. That image is from 3,000 years ago. Our oldest histories, before we even had writing. How do you exist in it?" The projection flickered and died. The artifact went silent, but the question hung in the air between them like smoke, like accusation, like the first crack in a reality neither of them was prepared to see shatter. Aaron touched his face, the scar above his eyebrow suddenly feeling like a brand, like proof of something he couldn't begin to understand. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "I think we need to figure out what else is in that crypt." Kalra didn't speak for a long time after the projection faded. She stood perfectly still. Her breathing controlled the way Nayari breathed when they were making difficult decisions. Aaron had seen her do it once before, when she'd had to choose between two equally important translation projects. She'd stood like a statue for 20 minutes. This time she broke after 5. "My father is on the Council of Voices," she said quietly. "High Counselor Thielvun, second only to the speaker herself." Aaron felt the words land like physical blows. He'd known Kalra came from an important family. You didn't get solo exploration rights to sealed archaeological sites without serious backing. But the Council? The Council governed all Nayari settlements on Arendal. They controlled access to the ancient sites, determined what history was preserved and what was forgotten. "So when you found this," Aaron gestured to the artifact, "you were supposed to report it immediately." "I was supposed to destroy it immediately." Her voice was hollow. "There's a protocol. Anything found below the third seal that contradicts official chronology is classified as corruption and neutralized. No analysis, no documentation, just removal from existence." "That's insane. You're destroying your own history." "We're protecting our truth," Kalra corrected, but she didn't sound convinced. "That's what I've been taught. That's what I believed." She finally looked at him. "Until I found something that knew your name before you spoke it." Aaron moved to the window, watching the mists roll across the valleys. In the distance he could see the bioluminescent forests that the Nayari cultivated, patterns of light that spelled out poems in their visual language. Beautiful and controlled, just like everything in their culture. "There's a story," Kalra continued. "My grandmother told it to me when I was young, about a human who came before humans came, a traveler who appeared in the early days and walked among us. The elders tried to send him home, but he said he was already home. He said he'd always been here." "What happened to him?" "The story ends 3 ways, depending on who tells it. In one version, he simply faded like morning mist. In another, he became part of the land itself. But my grandmother's version..." She paused. "She said he stayed, that he's still here, somehow, waiting." The artifact pulsed, not with sound or light, but with something else, a feeling that crawled up Aaron's spine and settled in his chest, like recognition from something that knew him better than he knew himself. "Touch it with me," Kalra said suddenly. "What?" "Touch it." At the same time, "I want to try something." Every academic instinct Aaron had screamed that this was a terrible idea. Unknown alien artifact, potentially dangerous, definitely defying physics. But his fingers were already moving toward it, drawn by something deeper than logic. Kalra's hand came from the other side. When their fingers touched the artifact simultaneously, the world went white. Not light. Not exactly. More like suddenly being able to see additional dimensions of color that didn't have names. The artifact sang, and in that song, Aaron felt something slot into place. Like a puzzle piece he hadn't known he was missing. Like coming home after years of being lost. When the moment passed and they jerked their hands back, They were both trembling. The artifact's surface now showed two overlapping patterns, one human, one Nayari, intertwined so completely they couldn't be separated without destroying both. "Aaron," Kylara whispered. "What was that?" He stared at his hand. It looked normal, felt normal. But something had changed at a level he couldn't name. "I don't know. But I need to understand it." He turned to her. "I know what you're risking. If your father finds out, if the council learns you hid this, they'll exile me, strip my family of their position, possibly worse." She met his eyes. "I know what I'm risking, Aaron. But something called you by name from 3,000 years ago. Someone with your face walked our world before your species came here. If there's even a chance that our entire understanding of ourselves is wrong, don't I have a responsibility to know?" Aaron wanted to tell her it wasn't worth it, that she should report the artifact, distance herself, protect her family, but the words that came out were different. "Someone called me from the past," he said, "and I'm going to answer, no matter what it costs." The artifact pulsed again, warmly, approvingly, and somewhere in the distance, alarms began to sound. Kailra's skin went pale. Energy detectors. The council monitors unusual readings from the ancient sites. They know something's active. They'll send guards. "How long do we have?" "Hours, maybe less." She looked at the artifact, then back at him. "We need to get this somewhere safe, somewhere they won't look." "Or," Aaron said, feeling something reckless and desperate rising in his chest, "we take it to where it came from. We go into those crypts and find out what else is down there." Kailra smiled. It was the third time he'd ever seen her do it. "Now you're thinking like someone who knows the ending doesn't matter as much as the truth." Outside, the alarms grew louder. Inside, the artifact continued its patient pulse, and Aaron Wells, disgraced linguist in exile, made a choice that would define his life, his death, and something far beyond either. They had 4 hours before the council guards would arrive at the station. Aaron knew this because Kailra pulled up the response protocols on her private network. 4 hours to find something in centuries of records that would make sense of an impossible artifact. He'd seen military operations with less coordination. Kailra accessed the restricted archaeological databases using her family credentials. Aaron pulled every paper he'd ever written on cross-species linguistic evolution. They worked in synchronized silence, passing tablets back and forth, highlighting passages, building connections that shouldn't exist, but did. "Here," Aaron said, projecting an image. "This is from the foundation layer of the oldest Nayari temple, your people's most sacred site. This symbol that you translate as eternal presence." Kailra studied it. "Yes, it's in our earliest texts, predates even our oral traditions. Now look at this." He overlaid another image, a human ideogram from ancient Earth, one that had been used in the region that would eventually become China. The character meant forever or eternal. They weren't identical. The Nayari version was more elaborate, flowing. But the core structure, the fundamental geometry that gave it meaning, was the same. "That's not possible," Kailra whispered. "Earth and Arendal are 800 light-years apart. There was no contact between our species until 60 years ago." "I know. I presented this finding in my dissertation. Want to know what the review board said?" She looked at him, those mirror eyes reflecting his bitterness back at him. "They said I was suffering from pattern recognition bias, that I was so desperate to prove humanity's importance in the galaxy that I was seeing human influence where there was only coincidence. They called my methodology academically reckless and my conclusions dangerously unscientific. The head of the board suggested I seek psychological evaluation." "What did you do?" Aaron smiled without humor. "I told him that if seeing patterns that everyone else missed was insanity, then every major scientific breakthrough in human history was made by madmen." They revoked my doctorate candidacy before I finished the sentence. Shilra was quiet for a moment. Then she pulled up another file. 3 months before I met you, I found something during a routine survey, a piece of writing in the deep archives. Very old. Classified as historical poetry. She displayed the text, ancient Nayari script, flowing and elegant. This is traditionally translated as Song of the First Light. It's taught to children as our creation myth. What does it say? In the common translation, from the void came voice, from voice came knowing, from knowing came we who remember. She paused. But I always thought that was strange. The grammar is wrong for creation poetry. The verb tenses suggest something already existed before the beginning. Aaron leaned closer. So how would you translate it? Literally? Before we spoke, someone was speaking. Before we remembered, someone was remembering. We are the echo of a voice that came before. She looked at the artifact, pulsing gently on the table. We're not the original song, Aaron. We're the response. He felt something click in his mind. Pull up every instance of that ideogram, the eternal present symbol. Show me everywhere it appears in your architectural record. It took Kelra 3 minutes. When the map appeared, showing the distribution of the symbol across ancient Nayari sites, Aaron's breath caught. They formed a pattern, not random placement, but a deliberate design. And at the center of that design, like the eye of a spiral, was the crypt where Kelra had found the artifact. Someone was planning this, Aaron said. 3,000 years ago, someone left a map, a human someone, or something that wanted us to find each other. Kelra pulled up another file, this one making her laugh suddenly. The sound was startling in the tense silence. Aaron, look at this translation from the same period. I found it years ago. Never understood it. The text read, "The visitor speaks in riddles, claims his heart beats in metal, says love is a stone that thinks. We do not understand his poetry, but find it beautiful in its strangeness." Aaron read it twice, then started laughing too. The kind of laughter that comes from too little sleep and too much impossible truth. They're talking about human metaphors. Whoever this was, he was trying to explain concepts like heart of gold to aliens who thought he meant his actual heart was metallic. Your species expressed love thus, Kelra said, perfectly imitating the formal tone of the ancient text. Through confusing metal-based cardiac descriptions? Wait until you learn about butterflies in the stomach. That one's going to really bother you. They were both laughing now, exhausted and slightly hysterical, when Kelra's communication device chimed. The sound cut through their moment like a blade. She looked at the message, and all color drained from her skin. "My father," she said quietly. "He's requesting my immediate presence at the council chamber for clarification of recent site activities." Do they know about the artifact? If they did, they'd send guards, not a summons. She stood, her movements careful. But they know something happened. The energy spike was too large to hide. I need to go. Give them an explanation that doesn't involve ancient human artifacts that know your name. What are you going to tell them? Kelra looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached out and touched the artifact one more time. It pulsed warmly under her fingers. "I've never lied to my father," she said softly. "Not once in my entire life. Our culture considers deception a form of violence against community. It's unthinkable." Kelra. "But I'm going to lie today, Aaron, because some truths are more important than comfort, even if it destroys me." She gathered her things and moved toward the door. Before she left, she turned back. "Whatever happens, don't let them take it. That artifact is proof you were right. Proof I was right. Don't let them erase us both." Then she was gone, and Aaron was alone with an impossible object and the feeling that he'd just watched someone step off a cliff for him. Aaron watched the chronometer. 2 hours since Kelra left. The artifact sat on the table, pulsing with what he was starting to recognize as a rhythm. Not mechanical, biological. Like it was breathing in time with something he couldn't see. He'd tried to work, to catalog more connections between human and Nayari history, but his attention kept drifting. Somewhere across the settlement, Kailra was lying to the most powerful figures in her civilization. For him, for a human she'd known for 3 years and barely understood. Why would she risk that? The artifact pulsed, and Aaron felt that same strange warmth in his chest, like recognition, like the thing could read his thoughts and was trying to answer questions he hadn't yet learned to ask. "What are you?" he whispered to it. It didn't respond in words. Instead, it projected a feeling. Not quite emotion, not quite memory. Something between nostalgia and longing. The sensation of missing someone you'd never met, of grieving for a loss that hadn't happened yet. Aaron reached toward it, then stopped. Every time they touched it, something changed. Something locked into place that couldn't be undone. Was he ready for another shift in whatever reality this thing was rewriting? His communicator buzzed. A message from Kailra, just 2 words. "It's done." Relief flooded through him. She'd convinced them she was coming back. They'd have time to plan, to figure out their next move. Then the door burst open. Kailra stumbled in, her skin flickering between colors like a broken light. Behind her, Aaron could hear shouts, the sound of guards mobilizing. She slammed her hand on the door controls, engaging the emergency lock. "What happened? I lied," she gasped. "I stood before the full council, before my father, before everyone I've ever respected, and I lied. I told them the energy spike was a calibration error, that I'd accidentally activated an old monitoring system. And they believed you?" "My father did. Because I've never lied before. Because in our culture, the daughter of a high counselor lying is as impossible as the sky falling." Her skin was cycling through colors Aaron had never seen. Distress patterns. But then, the artifact knew. Somehow, it knew. "What do you mean?" "While I was speaking, while I was betraying everything I was raised to value, I felt it. Here." She pressed her hand to her chest, like something was breaking and mending at the same time, and then the guard's scanners started screaming, energy readings spiking again, all pointing here. Aaron looked at the artifact. It was glowing now, bright enough to cast shadows. It reacted to your lie. "It reacted to my choice," Kailra corrected, like it was waiting to see what I'd do. She moved to the table, her hand shaking. "I ran, left the council chamber. My father called after me, but I ran anyway. They'll be here soon. Then we need to move now. Take the artifact and go." "Where?" "They control every transport off-planet. They monitor all the ancient sites." She laughed, bitter and broken. "I've destroyed my family for an object we can't keep and can't understand." The artifact pulsed again, stronger, and this time it didn't just project feelings. It projected an image. 2 figures, one human, one Nayari, standing in a crypt that looked like the one Kailra had described. The human male was on his knees, hands pressed against some kind of energy core. Dying, clearly, sacrificing himself. And the Nayari female was beside him, her skin cycling through every distress color at once, her hands touching his face. She was crying light, actual tears of luminescence, and her face was Kailra's face. Not similar, not ancestrally linked. The exact same face, down to the way her eyes reflected the world, down to the small marking above her right temple that Kailra had told him was a birthmark. "That's me," Kailra whispered, "but I've never been in that place. I've never seen that man before. I don't understand." Aaron stared at the human figure. The face was blurred, but the posture, the way he held himself even while dying, was familiar. "I think we've done this before," he said quietly. "I think we've been here before." The image shifted, the human's last words, preserved somehow in the artifact's memory. "Find me again, in the next turn. Promise you'll find me." And the Nayari responded, her voice breaking. "How can I find what I won't remember?" "You'll know. Somehow you'll know." The image faded. Kailra was crying now, real tears, not light. I don't understand. I don't understand any of this." Aaron moved to her, acting on instinct deeper than thought. He took her hands and the artifact pulsed between them. "I think that's us. Or was us. Or will be us. I think time doesn't work the way we thought it did." "That's insane. So is an artifact that knows my name. So is finding my face in your 3,000-year-old history. So is feeling like I've known you my entire life when we met 3 years ago." He squeezed her hands. "Maybe we're meant to be insane together." Outside, the sounds of approaching vehicles. Guard transports. Her father's personal vehicle, recognizable by its engine hum. Kael'ra looked at the door, then at Aaron, then at the artifact, and in that moment, Aaron saw her make a choice. Not the logical one, not the safe one, the human one. "The deep tunnels," she said, "the ones that connect to the original crypts. I know a way they won't follow, not immediately. Your father will come after you himself. I know." She grabbed a pack, started loading equipment. "Let me worry about my father. You worry about keeping that thing safe." Aaron carefully wrapped the artifact in shielding fabric. As he lifted it, it pulsed again, and this time, a second voice joined the first. Feminine. Ancient. Speaking in a dialect of Nayari so old it predated their written language. But Aaron understood it anyway. Somehow he understood perfectly. The next turn begins. The circle closes. The echo remembers. Kael'ra's eyes went wide. "That's my voice. That's my voice speaking words I've never said." "Then maybe," Aaron said, slinging the pack over his shoulder, "it's time we learned what we've been trying to tell ourselves." They ran for the tunnels as the guards breached the outer door. Behind them, Aaron heard a voice calling Kael'ra's name. Her father's voice, filled with confusion and betrayal. She didn't look back. The tunnels beneath Arendal were older than both their civilizations. Kael'ra led Aaron through passages that twisted like neural pathways, the walls covered in bioluminescent fungus that responded to their movement with ripples of soft blue light. "I found these paths when I was young," she said, her voice echoing strangely in the enclosed space. "My father used to bring me to the archaeological sites, said I needed to understand our history before I could help preserve it. I'd wander off, explore places I wasn't supposed to see. Rebellious even then," Aaron said, trying to keep his tone light despite the weight of the artifact in his pack and the sounds of pursuit somewhere behind them. "I never thought of it as rebellion, just curiosity." She paused at an intersection, touching the wall with her palm. The fungus brightened, revealing 3 different paths. She chose the leftmost one without hesitation. "This way. It leads to the deepest crypt, the one they sealed after the last expedition." "Why was it sealed?" "The expedition team reported seeing things, hearing voices. One claimed to have spoken with someone who'd been dead for millennia." She glanced back at him. "They were declared mentally compromised, retired from service. The site was sealed to prevent further psychological contamination." Aaron felt the artifact pulse against his back. Or maybe they actually did hear something. Maybe the past isn't as quiet as everyone assumes. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber, and Aaron's breath caught. The walls weren't carved. They'd been grown, shaped by some process that fused stone and living matter into patterns that hurt to look at directly. Geometric, but organic. Mathematical, but emotional. And everywhere, that same ideogram. The one that meant eternal presence in Nayari and forever in ancient human languages. Repeated thousands of times, spiraling toward the center of the room where a platform stood, empty except for a circular indentation exactly the size of the artifact. "This is where you found it," Aaron whispered. Yes, it was covered in dust, like it had been waiting here for millennia. Kael'ra moved toward the platform, her skin reflecting the chamber's strange light. "I touched it before I understood what it was, and the moment I did, I knew your name. Just knew it, like I'd always known it. Kael'ra." "Place it back," she said, In the center. I need to see what happens. Every instinct Aaron had screamed against it, but his hands were already moving, unwrapping the artifact, carrying it to the platform. When he set it in the circular indentation, it clicked into place with a sound like a lock opening. The chamber exploded with light, not destructive, not painful, but overwhelming, like suddenly being able to see every moment of time simultaneously. Aaron felt himself falling or flying, or neither, because motion had no meaning in this space between spaces. And then he was standing in the chamber again, but different, 3,000 years different. He wore clothes he didn't recognize, spoke languages he'd never learned, but he was himself, completely and undeniably himself. And beside him stood a Nairi woman he knew better than his own reflection. "You can't do this," she was saying, her voice breaking. "You'll die. The core is failing, and if you try to stabilize it, you'll die." "If I don't, this entire region collapses," his past self replied. "Your people, the settlements, everything, gone. Then we evacuate, we save who we can." "And abandon your history, your sacred sites, everything that makes you who you are?" He touched her face gently. "I didn't come all this way just to watch you lose your world. You came because you were lost, because your ship malfunctioned. You never meant to be here." "Maybe that's what I told myself," he smiled. "But I'm starting to think there are no accidents, just patterns we can't see yet." She grabbed his hands. "Then see this pattern. I can't lose you. I won't." "You won't lose me," he promised. "I'll find a way back. I'll always find a way back to you." The vision shifted. Aaron saw himself, his past self, pressing his hands against the failing energy core, saw the light consuming him, saw Kaelra's past incarnation screaming, trying to pull him back, saw the moment when he crystallized his final thoughts, his last words, his desperate love into the artifact. A beacon across time, a promise carved into the fabric of reality itself. The vision shattered. Aaron was back in his own body, collapsed on the chamber floor. Kaelra was beside him, her skin cycling through every color at once, tears streaming down her face in luminescent rivers. "I watched you die," she sobbed. "I held you while you burned, while you saved us all, and I couldn't stop it. I couldn't save you." Aaron reached for her with shaking hands. "You did save me. You kept looking, across 3,000 years and a cycle you didn't remember. You found me again, but you died for us. You always die for us." "Maybe," Aaron said, pulling himself to sitting. "Or maybe this time is different. Maybe the artifact wasn't just a memory. Maybe it was instructions." The artifact was glowing brighter now, and Aaron could feel something building in the chamber. Power, ancient and patient, gathering like a storm. Behind them, the sound of footsteps, multiple sets. The guards had found them. And at the front of the group, moving with the controlled fury of a parent whose child had betrayed everything, came High Counselor Thael Vun. Kaelra's father stopped at the entrance to the chamber, his eyes taking in the scene. His daughter, crying on the floor beside a human, the artifact glowing with impossible light, the walls showing truths that should have remained buried. "Kaelra," he said, his voice heavy with something between anger and grief. "What have you done?" She looked up at him, her face streaked with light. "What I should have done 3,000 years ago, Father. I chose truth over comfort. I chose love over duty." "Love?" The word sounded foreign in his mouth. "You barely know this human." "I've known him longer than I've been alive," Kaelra said, standing on unsteady feet. "And I'm done pretending I don't." The artifact pulsed and the chamber began to shake. The guards surrounded them in a perfect tactical formation, weapons drawn but not aimed. Not yet. They were waiting for orders from the High Counselor, who stood at the chamber entrance like judgment personified. Aaron helped Kaelra to her feet. The artifact continued its relentless pulse, growing brighter with each beat. The walls responded, their patterns shifting and flowing like living things. "Father," Kaelra said, her voice steadier now, "you need to see what this is, what it means." "I see my daughter committing treason," Thalvin replied. I see her destroying centuries of carefully maintained truth for a human who has filled her mind with dangerous ideas. The truth was already dangerous, Aaron said. You just hid it better. The counselor's attention snapped to him. You, the disgraced linguist, the man who saw patterns where there were none. You've contaminated my daughter with your academic madness. Or maybe I just asked questions no one wanted to answer. Thaelvun moved into the chamber slowly, studying the walls. Aaron watched his expression shift from anger to something more complex. Recognition, maybe. Or fear. These markings. They shouldn't be here. We sealed this chamber precisely because of these markings. Because they prove humans were here before, Kaelra said. Before we built our civilization. Before we thought ourselves alone. They prove we're not the original voice. They prove nothing except that some humans are willing to see their reflection in any surface. But Thaelvun's voice lacked conviction. His eyes kept returning to the artifact, to the way it pulsed in perfect synchronization with his daughter's distressed color patterns. The artifact spoke then, both voices simultaneously. Aaron's voice from 3 millennia past and Kaelira's, weaving together in a harmony that made reality feel thin. The cycle turns, 3,000 revolutions, the promise kept. Thaelvun stumbled backward. That's your voice, Kaelra. How is that your voice? Because I've said these words before, she whispered. Because I've stood here before watching someone I loved sacrifice everything, and I'm watching it happen again. Aaron felt something shift in his chest. A certainty that had been building since the moment Kaelra walked through his door at midnight. It's a cycle, isn't it? Every 3,000 years we find each other. Every time, I die saving your world. Every time, you lose me. Oh, that's insane, Thaelvun said, but his voice was weak. It's documented, Aaron countered. In your myths, in your sealed records. The human who came before humans came. The visitor who stayed. You just never connected it to an actual cycle because that would mean your entire chronology was built on a lie. Kaelra pulled up her data tablet with shaking hands, projecting information onto the chamber walls. Astronomical data. Arundel's stellar precession cycle. 3,000 years, almost exactly. And in our deepest archives, there are records of cataclysmic energy events, perfectly spaced. Every 3 millennia, something happens that should destroy us, but doesn't. Because someone stops it, Aaron finished. Someone who understands the energy patterns because he's seen them before. Died stopping them before. How many times? Kaelra asked, turning to him. Her eyes reflected his face back at him, and in that reflection, he saw fear. How many times have you died for me? I don't know. The artifact only showed us one cycle, but if this has been happening since the beginning. Aaron did the math in his head and felt sick. Dozens of times, maybe hundreds. Then we break it, Kaelra said fiercely. We break the cycle. We find another way. The chamber shook violently. Dust fell from the ceiling. The artifact's light intensified until it was almost unbearable. One of the guards called out, Counselor, the energy readings are spiking again. If this continues, the entire crypt system could collapse. Then we evacuate, Thaelvun ordered. Pull back to safe distance. Let this chamber bury its secrets. No, Kaelra said. If we leave now, the energy will cascade through the fault lines. You know what's beneath this region? Half the capital city sits on these foundations, millions of people. Then what do you suggest? Her father's voice was sharp with desperation. Aaron looked at the artifact, at the platform, at the patterns on the walls. All of it pointed to one solution. The same solution it had always pointed to. Someone has to stabilize the core. Someone has to complete the cycle. Absolutely not. Kaelra grabbed his arm. I won't watch you die again. I won't. Do we have a choice? There's always a choice, her voice broke. That's what makes it a sacrifice instead of just fate. Aaron pulled her close, speaking quietly so only she could hear. How many times have we had this conversation, you think? How many times have you tried to stop me and I went anyway? Then maybe this is the time I actually do stop you, she said, crying again. Maybe that's how we break the cycle. Or maybe, Aaron said gently, maybe we break it by me going willingly instead of desperately, by choosing this instead of having it forced on us. Philosophically poetic, Kael'ra said with a broken laugh, but still ends with you dead. Probably. Aaron looked at Thialfun. How long until the cascade reaches critical? The counselor checked his guard's readings. Minutes, perhaps less. Then I should stop wasting them. Aaron pulled away from Kael'ra and grabbed the artifact. It burned hot in his hands but didn't hurt, like it recognized him, like it had been waiting for this moment across 3,000 years of patience. Aaron, no! Kael'ra lunged for him. He was already running, sprinting toward the center platform where the energy core pulsed beneath layers of ancient shielding. Behind him, he heard Kael'ra screaming his name, heard Thialfun ordering guards to stand down, heard the chamber groaning as it began to tear itself apart. But mostly, he heard the artifact singing, a song that sounded like goodbye and hello at the same time, a promise kept and a promise broken, and a promise that existed outside the normal flow of time. He reached the core and placed the artifact against the failing shield. Energy arced through him, hot and cold and everything in between. The artifact's voices spoke one last time together. This is the moment. This is always the moment. But this time, remember. Remember what? Aaron gasped. That love doesn't end. It echoes. It waits. It finds a way. The world went white. The white faded into colors Aaron had never seen before. He was still in the chamber, but also somewhere else. Somewhen else. The artifact had fused with his hands, or maybe his hands had fused with it. He couldn't tell where his biology ended and the ancient technology began. The energy core thrummed beneath the platform, and Aaron could feel it. Not with his hands or his instruments, but with something deeper. He could feel the planet's heartbeat, the network of power that connected every ancient site, every sealed chamber. And he could feel it failing, not catastrophically, not yet, but inevitably like a body slowly shutting down. Behind him, chaos. Kael'ra fighting against her father's guards who were trying to hold her back. Thialfun shouting orders no one was following. The chamber itself seeming to hold its breath. Aaron! Kael'ra's voice cut through everything. Don't you dare! Don't you dare do this without me! She broke free. Aaron heard her footsteps, fast and desperate, crossing the chamber floor. Felt her hands on his shoulders, trying to pull him back from the core. This isn't how it has to be, she said, her voice raw. Every time before, you faced this alone. But I'm here now. I remember now. We can find another way. There isn't another way, Kael'ra. Then we do it together. Both of us. Share the burden. Aaron wanted to turn to look at her, but the artifact held him locked in place. The energy was building, demanding stabilization, demanding sacrifice. If we both die, who carries the memory? Who makes sure the next cycle is different? I don't care about the next cycle. She was crying, her tears falling on his shoulders like warm rain. I care about this one, this moment, this you. The artifact pulsed, and suddenly Aaron could see it. All the cycles, all the iterations, hundreds of times, playing out across millennia. Sometimes he was a merchant who wandered into the wrong cave, sometimes a scholar studying ruins, once memorably a soldier who deserted his unit and gotten lost in the wilderness. But always, eventually, he found Kael'ra, or she found him. And always, the planet's energy demanded balance. Always, he died alone, with her watching. I've been so stubborn, Aaron said, laughing despite everything. Every single time, you try to stop me. And every single time I ignore you and play the hero, because I'm too proud to accept help. Too convinced I'm the only one who can fix things. Yes, Kael'ra said. You're infuriatingly heroic. It's one of your worst qualities. What if this time I listen? What if this time we're smart instead of noble? The artifact showed him something then, a possibility, a way to stabilize the core that didn't require death, just change, transformation, but it would mean giving up something fundamental, some piece of himself that made him human. I can feel what it wants, Aaron said quietly. The core doesn't need death. It needs connection. A bridge between the human energy patterns and the Nayari ones. Someone who can translate between them. Thielven had approached, his guards falling back. What are you saying? I'm saying your myths got it half right. The human who came before didn't die. He changed, became something else, something that could maintain the balance. That's impossible, the counselor said. So is an artifact that records souls, Aaron countered. So is a love that survives 3,000 years. I think we're past impossible. The chamber shook again, harder. Cracks appeared in the walls, and the bioluminescent fungus flared bright in distress. We're running out of time, one of the guards called out. Kael'ra moved around to face Aaron. Her hands cupped his face, and her eyes reflected him back at himself. But in that reflection he looked different, lighter somehow, like he was already starting to fade. If you do this, she said, will I lose you anyway? I don't know. The artifact says I'll change, become something between human and Nayari, part of the energy network. But it also says... He paused, feeling the truth of it in his bones. It says I'll still be me, still able to think, to feel, to remember, to love. Especially that. She pressed her forehead against his, a Nayari gesture of deep intimacy, one she taught him years ago but he'd never seen her use. Then do it. But you listen to me, Aaron Wells. You come back. However changed, however different, you find a way back. I always do, apparently. Not this time as a stranger. This time remembering. This time knowing who you're coming back to. The artifact sang approval, and Aaron felt the transformation beginning. It didn't hurt. It should have by all rights, but it felt more like coming home, like finally being in a place he was meant to be. His father's voice carried across the chamber.
The readings are changing. The cascade is reversing. He's actually doing it. Aaron looked at Thielven, and with his changing vision, he could see things he'd never noticed before. The way the counselor held himself like a man bearing impossible weight. The way his skin showed patterns of old grief, old losses. You knew, Aaron said. You knew about the cycles. I suspected, Thielven admitted. The sealed records hinted at it, but I thought if we buried the evidence deep enough, maybe the pattern would break on its own. Patterns don't break from ignorance, Father, Kael'ra said sharply. They break from understanding. The transformation was accelerating. Aaron could feel himself spreading thin, becoming part of the network, but he held on to himself, held on to the memory of Kael'ra's face, her voice, the way she looked at him, like he was worth destroying her world for. It's working, he managed to say. The core is stabilizing, but I can't hold on much longer. Can't stay solid. Then don't, Kael'ra said. Let go. Trust that you'll come back. How can you be sure? Because you're too stubborn to stay dead. You've proven that hundreds of times. She smiled through her tears. And because I'll be here waiting, however long it takes, however many forms you take, I'll know you. The chamber filled with light, but this time it wasn't destructive. It was transformative. Aaron felt himself becoming part of the walls, the floor, the ancient network of energy that sustained the planet, felt his consciousness spreading across the system like roots. But in the center of it all, in the space where his heart used to be, he kept one piece of himself intact. One memory, one promise,
"I'll find you," he whispered, and wasn't sure if he said it out loud or just thought it so hard that the universe had no choice but to hear. This time, "I'll find you remembering." Then he was everywhere and nowhere, everything and nothing, and the chamber stopped shaking. The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then the chamber exploded with energy in reverse. Not destructive, but restorative. Every crack in the walls sealed. Every damaged pattern reformed. The bioluminescent fungus blazed with light bright enough to rival the suns outside. And Aaron was gone. Not dead. Kalara could still feel him somehow. In the hum of the walls, in the pulse of energy beneath her feet, he'd become part of the place itself, woven into the fabric of what made Arundel alive. She stood frozen where he'd been, her hands still outstretched, touching nothing but air that felt warmer than it should. "Kalara." Her father's voice was gentle in a way she'd never heard before. "We need to evacuate. The energy levels are stable, but the chamber isn't structurally sound. We need to go." "He's still here," she said. "He's not gone. I can feel him." "I know. But we need to move." The guards were already retreating, pulling back to safe distance. The walls groaned, and dust began falling in sheets. Whatever Aaron had done to stabilize the core, it had cost the chamber itself, like the building was exhaling its last breath now that its purpose was complete. Thylvun took his daughter's arm, firm but not forcing. "Kalara, please." She let him guide her toward the exit, but with every step, she looked back. The artifact was still on the platform, but it looked different, dimmer, like it had poured all its stored energy into the transformation, into Aaron. They were halfway down the tunnel when the collapse began. Not violent. Almost gentle, really. The chamber folding in on itself with the patient finality of something ancient finally allowed to rest. The sound echoed through the passages, a rumble that Kalara felt in her chest. When they emerged into the open air, dawn was breaking over Arundel. The twin suns painted the mist oceans in shades of amber and rose. It was beautiful in a way that felt wrong. How could the world look so normal when everything had changed? Thylvun's communication device buzzed constantly. Reports from across the capital. The energy spike had registered on every monitor in the city, but no damage, no casualties, just a moment of overwhelming power that had somehow left everything intact. "They're calling it a miracle," one of the guards reported, "saying the old ones protected us." Kalara laughed, bitter and exhausted. "They're not wrong. Just off by 3,000 years on which old one." Her father dismissed the guards, leaving them alone on the hill overlooking the collapsed crypt. In the growing daylight, they could see the extent of the damage. The entire chamber system had caved in, leaving a depression in the landscape like a wound in the earth. "I failed you," Thylvun said quietly. "I knew there were truths we weren't acknowledging. I knew our history had gaps, but I thought protecting the official narrative was more important than pursuing uncomfortable questions." "Indoi, you were trying to maintain stability," Kalara said. "I understand that now. But at what cost?" He gestured to the collapsed crypt. "At the cost of forcing the same sacrifice over and over? At the cost of erasing a love that literally shaped our world?" "It's not erased," Kalara said firmly. "It's just changed form, like Aaron did." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Thylvun said something that surprised her. "He was right, you know, in his dissertation, the one we all mocked. He was completely right." "I know. I'm going to make sure everyone else knows too." Her father's voice had the weight of official decision. "I'm going to unseal the records, all of them. Let our people see the truth about our origins, about the cycles, about the human who kept saving us while we forgot he existed. They might not accept it, then they can argue with the evidence, but I won't be part of hiding it anymore." He turned to her. "What will you do?" Kalara looked at the collapsed crypt, at the space where Aaron had become something else. "I'm going to wait," she said simply. "He promised he'd come back, and I'm going to be here when he does. That could take years." Decades. I have time. She smiled slightly. I'm patient. It's a Nayari trait. Her father pulled her into an embrace, rare for their people, and whispered, I'm sorry I didn't believe you. I'm sorry I didn't see what he was willing to give. You see it now. That's what matters. When he left to make his reports, to begin the complicated process of rewriting official history, Kyelra stayed. She sat on the hill as the suns climbed higher, as the mists burned away to reveal the valleys below. She sat through the day and into the evening, when the bioluminescent forests began their nightly glow. And as the first stars appeared, she felt something change. A warmth in the air where there shouldn't be warmth, a presence that felt like coming home. She stood, her heart racing, and walked to the edge of the collapsed crypt. The ground was glowing, not with reflected light, but with something internal. Patterns forming in the exposed earth. She recognized them immediately. Human writing, ancient standard, the language Aaron had studied his entire life. She climbed down carefully, following the glowing script. It wound through the rubble in a spiral, leading to the center where the chamber had been. And there, written in light bright enough to read by, was a message. 3 words that made her cry and laugh at the same time. Still listening, waiting, here. Kyelra pressed her hand against the words, and they pulsed warmly under her palm. Like a heartbeat, like a promise kept. I hear you, she whispered. I hear you, and I'm not leaving. However long it takes, however many forms you take, I'll be here. The light intensified for a moment, then faded to a gentle glow. Sustainable, patient, eternal. Kyelra sat beside the words and waited for morning. 5 years passed. The council unsealed the records as promised. What they found rewrote Nayari history so completely that some refused to believe it. Others embraced it with the fervor of people who'd always known something was missing from their understanding of themselves. The academic community debated endlessly. Papers were published, theories proposed, evidence examined and re-examined. Aaron Wells, once ridiculed as a crackpot linguist, was posthumously awarded every honor his field could bestow. His dissertation was republished and became required reading. But Kyelra paid little attention to the debates. She'd left the council, left politics entirely, and dedicated herself to a single task: translating the ancient records. All of them. Every sealed document, every forbidden text, every piece of evidence that humans and Nayari had been connected far longer than anyone imagined. She worked from a small station she'd built near the collapsed crypt, close enough to feel the warmth that still emanated from the ground where Aaron had transformed, close enough to read the words that glowed softly every night. Still listening, waiting, here. Sometimes other scholars visited. They asked questions, studied the site, marveled at the way the energy patterns remained stable without any maintenance, as if the planet itself had learned to care for what Aaron had become. Don't you want to return to the capital? They'd ask. Your father could reinstate your position. You could lead the research from a proper facility. I'm exactly where I need to be, oh, she'd always answer. What she didn't tell them was that she could hear him sometimes. Not words exactly, more like feelings. A warmth when she was sad, a sense of approval when she solved a particularly difficult translation. Once when she'd been sick, the entire station had maintained perfect temperature without any systems running, as if the building itself was caring for her. You're still here, she'd whisper to the walls, still being stubborn, still refusing to completely let go. The walls would warm in response. In the 3rd year, human scholars began arriving. They'd heard about Aaron's vindication, about the proof that their species had walked Arendal millennia before official contact. They came with apologies and regret, wishing they'd listened when he was alive. Kyelra received them politely but distantly. Their guilt meant nothing to her. Aaron had never needed their approval. He'd only needed to be right. And he had been. By the 5th year, she'd translated most of the critical documents. The story they told was beautiful and impossible, cycles of connection stretching back to the beginning of Nayari civilization. Human travelers arriving by accident or fate, always at moments of crisis, always choosing to help despite the cost, and always a Nayari who loved them, not the same individual, but the same soul, apparently, reborn each cycle. Kael'ra found records of her own past incarnations, 27 different lives, 27 times falling in love with the same impossible human, 27 times watching him sacrifice himself. But not this time, she told the glowing words one evening. This time you got to stay, changed but present. That has to count for something. The ground pulsed warmly. It was on a night much like the one when everything began, 5 years to the day since Erin's transformation, that Kael'ra heard the sound. A knock, not on her station door, deeper, coming from the direction of the collapsed crypt. She stood from her desk, translations forgotten, and moved to the window. The ruins were glowing brighter than usual. The patterns in the earth were moving, shifting, forming something new. And from the center of the collapsed chamber, where Erin had become part of the network, light was rising. Not metaphorical light, actual physical luminescence taking shape and form. Kael'ra ran. Didn't bother with equipment or protocols, just ran across the dark ground toward the ruins. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might break free of her chest. The light coalesced as she approached, became solid, became familiar, became a figure standing at the edge of the collapsed crypt, looking around with confused wonder. Human in shape, but not quite. His skin held a faint luminescence, like he'd absorbed some Nayari characteristics. His eyes reflected the world the way hers did, but his face was unmistakably Erin's. Older somehow, despite 5 years of not aging. Wiser, changed by transformation but still fundamentally himself. He saw her and smiled, that same lopsided smile she'd seen across 3 years of translation arguments and 5 years of memory. "Hey," he said, his voice rusty from disuse but still his. "Sorry I'm late. Turns out becoming a planetary energy network is more time-consuming than you'd think." Kael'ra stopped 3 feet away from him, afraid that if she touched him, he'd dissolve back into light. "You're really here. Solid. Physical." "Mostly," Erin said, looking at his hands. They flickered slightly, like a hologram not entirely stable. "I can't maintain this form permanently, few hours at a time, maybe. But I figured out how to pull myself back together. Took a while to remember how to be a person instead of a power grid." 5 years. "I know, I'm sorry. I wanted to come back sooner, but I had to make sure the planet was stable first. Had to make sure I could leave the network without everything collapsing." He took a step toward her. "But I promised I'd come back, and I've apparently made that promise enough times that the universe wouldn't let me break it." Kael'ra closed the distance between them, touched his face gently, half expecting her hand to pass through. But he was solid, warm, real. "You remember," she whispered. "You remember us, all of us." "Every cycle," Erin confirmed. "It all came back when I transformed. Every life, every meeting, every goodbye. We've done this dance for so long, Kael'ra, but this is the first time I've been able to come back knowing who you are. Is it enough? Being part of the planet? Only being physical sometimes? Is it enough for you, being loved by someone who's only part human anymore?" She laughed, crying at the same time. "You were always only part human. The human part was stubborn and reckless. The other part was something that loved so completely that it rewrote physics." "So is that a yes?" "That's a, you're stuck with me for the next cycle, and all the ones after, so you better get used to it." Erin pulled her close, and for the first time in 5 years, Kael'ra felt complete. Like a piece of herself had been missing, and finally returned. They stood together at the edge of the ruins as the night deepened. When dawn came, Erin's physical form began to fade, dispersing back into the planetary network. But before he went, he touched the ground, and new words appeared in glowing script. "Tomorrow night, same place, I'll practice being solid. Kylara watched him dissolve into light and felt no grief, because it wasn't an ending, just a different way of being together. That night, when she went to the lake near her station, she saw something in the reflection of the water. Two silhouettes standing side by side. One clearly human, one clearly Nayari, both glowing softly in the starlight. She understood then. They existed in multiple forms now. Physical when possible, energy when necessary. Reflected in water, in memory, in the very ground of the planet they'd saved together. Some loves, she realized, were too stubborn to be contained by a single reality. They spilled over into all the others, creating echoes that outlasted universes. The next night, true to his word, Aaron appeared again, more solid this time, more practiced at being a person. And the night after that, and the one after that, they fell into a rhythm. Nights together when he could hold physical form. Days when she felt him in the warmth of the walls, the stability of the planet, the gentle pulse of energy that kept their world alive. It wasn't the relationship they'd started with, but it was theirs, built across cycles and transformations, and an absolutely stubborn refusal to accept that death meant ending. Years later, when other scholars asked Kylara how she could be content with a love so unusual, so impossible to define, she'd smile and tell them the truth. Some echoes don't disappear. They just wait for you to learn how to listen. And once you do, you realize they were never silent at all. They were just speaking in a language deeper than words. The language of stubborn, impossible, absolutely human love that refuses to stay dead no matter how many times the universe tries to end it. And every night, when the stars came out, two silhouettes would appear in the reflection of the lake. One human, one Nayari. Standing together in whatever form reality allowed. Still listening, still waiting, still here, forever. In the end, Aaron and Kylara's journey reminds us that sometimes the universe doesn't test our strength. It tests our willingness to keep showing up, even when the rules rewrite themselves. And maybe that's the most human thing of all, the refusal to let meaning fade, even when everything else does. So let me ask you, what echoes from your own past keep calling you forward? What unfinished promise, unspoken truth, or stubborn hope refuses to die quietly? And if you could break just one cycle in your life of fear, hesitation, or silence, what would finally change? If you made it this far, write the word echo in the comments so I know you're part of this stubborn cosmic family. Tell me your city so we can see how far these echoes travel. And if this story resonated with you, hit like, subscribe, hype it in the comments, share it with someone who loves a good emotional paradox, and watch the next video that just appeared on your screen, because the universe always leaves another message waiting.